Welcome to Tiger Chainsaw Interviews. These exclusive interviews will give you a behind-the-scenes retrospective mixed in with some amazing secrets of your favorite games and franchises by the developers and creators of them. Now, if I have filmed the interview, you'll be able to watch it. Otherwise, it's a phone interview, so just sit back and relax. Now, I have done some incredible exclusive interviews with some amazing gaming legends in this community. So hit that sub button to make sure you don't miss any of those interviews. Alright, let's get to our interview of the day. Today, my guest is Nick Falzon, who has credits to over 67 games in the video game industry. Just to name a few, he's worked on the Call of Duty series, the X-Men series, the Tony Hawk series, and the James Bond 007 series. Now for this interview, we will be discussing his career at Activision, as well as touching on one of my favorite Xbox games from my childhood, Reckless: The Yakuza Missions. Nick had a huge role in the motion capture technology that was developed at Activision, but more on that later. Now, Nick is joining us from his remote farm that's out in the middle of nowhere, so reception could be spotty at times. Nick, first off, thank you so much for joining us today. What got you into the video game industry? I was researching your history, and it looks like Quake is the earliest credit that you have. Is that true, and what drew you into gaming?
Yeah, Quake is a pretty popular game for some of the hardcore PC gamers out there. And I got into video games when I was really young, as most kids. I'm 49. I started playing on the Atari when I was a little kid. I grew up pretty poor, so we didn't really have any game consoles, but the neighbor kids had them, and I'd play at their house. I'd watch them play, and then my parents weren't together, so I would go to my dad's. My dad did pretty well, so he would take me to the arcade, give me $20, and he'd go off and do dad stuff, and I'd be at the arcade for the day with my $20, and I kind of played pinball and stuff like that. And then this is where the passion started. Was like I just loved playing video games my whole life, and that's how it started for me. It was like arcades and consoles, pinball machines primarily, and some digital games, and but mostly pinball. I was really good at playing pinball games. I could get the machine to knock almost every time, and I just loved that feeling of like that endorphin that it kicked off when I got a free game. It was just like it kind of led me to always want to play video games. And then, as I grew older, I got into construction. My family did construction work, mechanical work, and I did that. And my family was ranchers, and so I did ranching work, and lived in Colorado, and I lived in the mountains up high up in the mountains and whatnot. And I did carpentry, and I did mechanical work, diesel work, and I still play video games in my spare time. And then I got married, and I moved to Huntington Beach, California. And I'm from California originally, so I moved back to Huntington to have start my family. And my wife was going to Otis Parsons Fashion School, and I was really jealous that she was doing what she loved to do, making clothes and her art and all the other stuff. And so I was doing construction. I was building somebody's house. And I was just like, man, I was like 20. I was 28 at the time, and I was like, the internet was just coming up around, there was the internet was just becoming popular, broadband modems, stuff like that, and I was on the internet, and I was writing scripts for different software on my own in my spare time, building my own computers in my spare time. I never lost the love of making or playing PC games, and I just happened to look at Monster.com, and Activision had the job interview. My first game title was Computer Game Guru, and that was like legitimately what the posting was hiring for on Monster.com at Activision. And I remember this to this day. I remember seeing the ad, and I'm like, oh my, like it's like the heavens opened, the rays of God shone down on me, and it was like, oh, I was like, this is what I meant to do with my life. I don't know what this means, but I need to apply for this. And I made a resume, and I applied, and I thought I was going to go on like this one-on-one interview to Activision, and I show up, and there's 40 guys there, all little things on their shirts. It's your typical tester crew, And I was like, I had my button-up shirt on, and I'm like super nerded out, and I'm like sitting there in this interview, and they're like, we're going to have you all take a test. So they gave us like this 4-page test of like how to determine the footprint of a computer, how many GBs and how many MB, how many KBs and MBs and a GB, all this other stuff, and there was 40 of it. I mean, literally, I'm not even kidding. There was like 35, 40 guys in this test, and then the lady, her name was Tanya, came back in. Tanya, she was the hiring person for QA. She came back in and she said, okay, I'm going to pull you all out of the room, and if I pull you out, just come with me. If I don't pull you out, just stay here. So one other guy didn't get called out, and I guess we passed, right? So we passed this test. They gave us some interviews with people that worked in QA and customer support and production, and he and I both got a job as testers. So that's how I got into Activision.
Wow, what a story, and what luck finding that job posting on Monster. It had to be a bit intimidating being in a room with 40 other applicants to the job that you're applying for, but it sounds like you were the best of the bunch and you got the job. Now I'm focusing this interview on a specific game that you had a role in, and that game is Reckless the Yakuza Missions on the Xbox. It's one of my favorite childhood games. Now it says that you were the Q&A lead for it. Can you explain it to me? What is a QA lead, and what are your responsibilities when it comes to a game?
Yeah, for sure. So QA lead they're called the project lead. The project lead is in charge of the culmination of the testing plans, the testing life cycle. Like, the games come down from production at a beta state, right? When they hit beta phase of development, that's time for a QA. Beta to gold is time for release, time for like a QA team to come onto a project. So that's the end of the life cycle of development. So when a game hits beta, that means it's ready for tests. They come down to the project lead. They pick a project lead. The project lead picks a bunch of testers. He picks a database manager who manages the inputting of the bugs from the testers into a database where we manage all this stuff that's going wrong with the game, that we report that back to the actual development team that's working on the game, and then they make iterative builds on that game of fixing those bugs and driving towards the road to release, which is Gold Master in the console world. And so a project lead is like you have to be an expert gamer, you have to be an expert note taker, you have to be an expert with personnel, because all the personnel has different intricacies in their personalities. They're introverts, extroverts. I had people that wore Luke Skywalker outfits in tests. I had like all kinds of like crazy shit going on, and so you got to manage all these things, emotions and feelings, and the database and the communication pipeline to production, and let them know that the game is nearing the end of the life cycle of testing, and that they have a clear QA write-off to release the game. And that's basically a project lead.
It sounds a lot more sophisticated than what I was anticipating. There's a lot to that role and a lot of responsibility that comes with it. So kudos to you for being able to juggle all of those duties while making sure that game was playable. Can you take us back to the Activision offices in the early 2000s? What were your coworkers like? What was the atmosphere? What was your desk like?
Yeah, so my desk, I had superhero lunch pails. I had the thing that everybody did at their desks is you would release a game and you would have the entire game team sign a copy of the game. And back then we did mostly PC games. We were starting on console games, but PC games, I don't know if you remember, they came in these big boxes. They were like these big PC boxes. They were like the size of like a big Webster's dictionary. And we would take them and we would all sign them to each other, and we would set them on our desks, and we would have the games that you worked on were like your decorations of your desk. And other people had other stuff too. They had whatever their cars, or they like little robots, or they like Transformers, they whatever you kind of liked, flags. One guy I worked with, his name was Tim. He was one of my in-team guys that inspired me. He always had all these weird, Japanese style, mental puzzles, physical puzzles that you had to solve, like the rope and the ring, and we'd all sit there and talk about games and solve these puzzles. And the offices were it was just cool, man. It was like, I couldn't believe they paid me to do this job. I mean, I did leave construction behind where I made $30-40 an hour working in the Carpenters Union, and I took a job at Activision making $9 an hour, so you can see that there was a huge cut in pay. I did make it up eventually, but the job was just so enjoyable. Walking into the offices were in Santa Monica. They were on 31st and Ocean Park. So you'd walk out of the offices, you could see the ocean. We were right there by Venice Beach in Santa Monica. There was, great places to eat around there. It was, the camaraderie was second to none. I made my best friends working there that I'm still friends with today. And we would go to lunch together. We'd go to breakfast together. We'd go to work. We'd go to lunch together. We'd go back to work. We'd go to dinner together and have drinks and cocktails, and then we'd go back to work. I mean, it was like, it was a lifestyle of making video games. And the offices was it was a plain white, brown, square building. But on the inside, there was like decorations about video games and cardboard cutouts of characters. Some floors were more interesting than others. The QA team was on the basement. The marketing and finance team was on the first floor, and HR. And then the second floor was production, and then the third floor was production, and they were separated by divisions of what kind of production games we were working on. Like the superhero was on the west side of the building, and the Call of Duty was on the east side of the building. So it was kind of like separated like that. But it was cool. It was a really cool vibe, and everybody was real friendly.
Man, it sounds like you were living the life. What a cool job. But I want to say how inspiring it is that you left a high-paying job to work a job that you're passionate about for $9 an hour. It takes a lot to make that move, and it paid off for you because you climbed the company ladder and became a producer on so many games, which leads me to my next question. What was it like becoming a producer and growing within the company, and what was the favorite game that you've produced?
The funny thing about video game production is for me, and I can only speak from my experience, it's exactly the same as building a house. There's a blueprint, your architectural design, there's your game design document, which tells you how the game is going to be and what it's going to be about. And you got your trades in the building a house, where you got your concrete, you got your drywall, you got your framers, you got your electricians, you got your plumbers, you got your roofers, and they build the house up. And it's the same thing in the video game industry, where you have your artists, your engineers, you have your animators, you have your all the staff that goes along with that. So for me, it was very easy to make the crossover. And so when I started in QA, I was like, okay, this is one part of this trade of making video games I'm learning. And like I learned construction doing one thing at a time, and making video games in the same way. And then I went from QA lead after like 6 months or so to a production coordinator on Pitfall, and then I got to work on the X-Men Legends game, which was the game that saved the X-Men franchise at Activision. It was one of the ones I got to work on as an associate producer or production coordinator, I think. And then I something that's not displayed well in my history on the network of the world is I actually am a co-founder of the Activision animation facility and motion capture facility and 3D scanning facility.
Wow.
While I all this stuff, I was working there, and I saw that we were spending a lot of money on motion capture, animation capture, human capture, and I saw that we were spending a lot of money on modeling characters and props and objects. And I took it upon myself to find people to work with in the industry, create a business plan, sell that business plan to Activision, and actually created this studio that's still in play today in Playa del Rey. The Activision motion capture facility was my brainchild. And Matt Carnes and myself made that happen. And that was that's something that's really doesn't ever come across any of the stuff I've done. But that was my swan song for Activision. And then after that, I left the company.
So what I'm hearing is you're kind of a big deal. And you're right, when I was researching, it doesn't come up anywhere on your history, so that's a great nugget of information. Now I wanted to ask you about your favorite memory of working with Activision. It could be something silly, something serious, but what's that one memory that you'll always think of when looking back on your time with Activision?
Oh man, wow. I think that for me, it's kind of a deep thing. It's like there's a lot of people that show up and do their jobs, and then they do a great job, and then they go home, And there's a lot of people that go into a job or a profession, and they just love what they do. For me, Activision was like, I'm a hands-on kind of guy. You know, I love seeing things that work well, and I like to make things better. You know, I like to I'd like to challenge myself to like, how can I make this better? Like, you know, how can I like build up a new studio for them to actually save money and do motion captures and get to run that studio for a bunch of years and create Call of Duty games that, you know, we work with all the stunt guys and all this other stuff. So, you know, like it was just like, I think driving to work every day was just like, I would just say to myself, I can't believe, you know, this is when I started making six figures and more money than you know, I knew what to do with. I was just like, I mean, and to me, six figures is a lot of money. Some people, six figures wasn't, this is back in early 2000s, six figures wasn't a lot of money. But to me, it was a lot of money. And I was just like, just couldn't believe that I got to get paid this money and I got to go play every day. I mean, I literally would go to work, we would do our job in the morning, and then we would all take a break, and we'd all go into the room where we had our console set up, and we'd all like play Gran Turismo together, we'd all play foosball together, we'd all go play some pool. You know, we'd go to a lunch and have a couple beers and burgers at the beach and come back and do our job. And like, it was just like, I just, it was an experience that like, I just can't even like, it's hard to like relate that to like, the people that like, you know, work like, you know, at like a bank. You know, they could never imagine like going out for lunch and having a beer, or, you know, going to work at the bank and then getting their cash drawer, then taking a break to go play video games with their coworkers, and then coming back and like, I mean, it just doesn't, people just don't get it. It doesn't make sense, I don't think. Like,
it's that team camaraderie that you're talking about, that team experience, that bond that you build with others when you're working on something together. But the work doesn't feel like work. It's fun. Now, I'm not in the video game industry, but I've experienced that with some sports teams and playing sports in general. I can understand it a little bit, but it just sounds like an incredible time for you during your time at Activision. Now, besides a game that was released in 2019, it looks like you've kind of taken a break from the gaming industry. What are you currently up to, and are there any plans to get back into gaming, or are there any projects in the pipeline that we can look forward to supporting?
You know, what's funny is I've never quit working on games. I work on Disney games to this day, and so I worked on World War II. The game didn't do so well, so we shelved that. Before that, I worked on Yahtzee with Buddies and Dice with Buddies with Scopely. I worked on a couple games before that with a small company called Fuel Industries, and we did a game called Broadcast, which was animatronic puppets, like the Muppets or Sesame Street, in an app that you could like, you know, create your own vignettes and skits. And then I went to Scopely, then I went to Jam City. In Jam City, I did a bunch of smaller games there that we were trying to do the Facebook games, Facebook Marketplace, you know, did a lot of partnerships with Facebook. Released World War II. That did okay, but it wasn't like a blockbuster. I'm now working on Disney Emoji Bliss. And Disney Emoji Bliss is a game that's been around for over 5 years. It makes $10 million a month. And I am a feature producer for that franchise.
Can you tell us about that franchise? What exactly is Disney Emojis?
Yeah, so Disney Emoji Blitz is a match 3 game. We all know what emojis are. We send happy faces and kissy faces and, you know, thumbs up to people all the time. And emojis are basically Disney characters emojified. And you play them as, you know, one of your favorite Disney emoji characters. You got to match them on a match board. It's a wildly popular game. I think it's top 30 in the App Store right now, top 40 in the App Store right now. It's on Google and Apple, and we also have it on Facebook games. It's a free-to-play game. It has events and storylines, and it has, you know, animations, and, you know, it has, you know, live operations events, and, you know, new emojis are coming out all the time, and we have released new features every month or two, and we're on our 50th. We're coming up on our 50th major release, and by summertime will be the 50th major update to this game, and we think by.
Wow, talk about sustaining success. That is a pretty popular project you are overseeing. Okay, Nick, I got one last bonus question for you. Can you recall any fun facts or any insight or memories of working on Reckless the Yakuza missions? It was such a fun game from my childhood, and I'd love to hear anything about it from someone who worked on it.
I wanted that game so bad. as a project lead, you know the games are coming. You see the producers up in production working on these games that aren't in QA yet, and you hang out with them, and as a QA lead, you see what they're working on, and they kind of pick who they want to run their games. You know, whether it's Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, I got to work on Tony Hawk. I got to work on Matt Hoffman. I got to work on Quake. I got to work on, you know, Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer. I was a project lead on all of these games, a lot of these games, and not all of them. Wake 40 I didn't do. Tony Hawk's one version I didn't do, but I did do some of the other ones. But on Reckless, the Yakuza mission, it was like, I think I recall it was the first Xbox game ever, or at least the first Xbox game ever for Activision. I don't remember which one it was, but I wanted that feather in my cap. I wanted to do I love that being the first, like the first man on the moon. I wanted to be the first QA lead to take a Xbox game through the process. And the game was gorgeous back then. I mean, in 98, 99, 2000, whenever that game, 2001, whenever that game was, it was absolutely a gorgeous game. It was I think it was a Japanese outfit. You know, it was a driving game. It had destructible environments. It had missions. It was like something that was like, it was a really a good game to look at back then, and that was something I wanted to be a part of.
Nick, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us to discuss your time at Activision, sharing your memories and that nugget of information about how you were responsible for the motion capture technology at Activision. And I also found that it was really cool that you worked on the first ever Xbox game for Activision. That's what makes these interviews so special. So from me and everyone else, thank you, Nick, for your time. And I'd also like to thank you, the listener, for taking time out of your day to listen to this interview. What's an interesting fact that you learned during this? Did you know that Reckless was the first Xbox game? Were you aware of the Activision motion capture technology that Nick had created? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and why don't you tell me someone that you hope that I interview in the future? Maybe I'll make it happen. While you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel to help it grow. Thanks for listening.